Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston. I'm your host for this episode and we're recording on a Monday morning, a beautiful Monday morning in Manchester after Manchester United defeated West Ham 3-0 at Old Trafford on Sunday afternoon. I'm joined by Samuel Luckhurst, our chief correspondent for today's episode. Samuel, how are you first and foremost?
Feeling very well, very fresh. Good start to the week, apart from the defeat in the cricket, unfortunately.
Well, you were just telling me you got up at, was it 4 a.m. this morning to watch the cricket?
Yeah.
That is some dedication. I was catching 50 winks at that point, preparing myself for a busy week.
Well, it's busy, but fortunately where there's no midweek game and United have won very well, hopefully it's quite a quiet, sedate week. But as we know from covering United, there's always something that comes up. So I'm sure there will be something before that Villa game on Sunday.
Feels a bit weird as well, because you can probably tell in the tone of my voice I'm a bit chipper. It's another really positive episode. I love a bit of positivity on a Monday. It was very positive last week, of course. In this episode, we'll look at the game, look at the performance, the good. I sometimes say the good, bad and the ugly, but it was probably... Is it good, all right?
Unfortunately,
because it was probably the
Martinez,
perfect afternoon, except for Martinez's injury. We'll discuss that as well in the second part. And for the third part, we'll look at some loans at the moment. Donny van der Beek, Hannibal and Mason Greenwood, who are, of course, away from the club on temporary deals. First and foremost, though, Samuel, we'll get into the display. As I said, it probably was the perfect performance, but for Martinez's injury, United had a 1-0 lead at half-time. Rasmus Højlund, a brilliant goal. Garnacho, 2 goals in the second half. Really important 3 points, and it really feels like United are building momentum now.
It was certainly one of their most positive days of the season. I think what enhanced the performance and the result as well was that West Ham weren't that bad. I thought West Ham were pretty good in the first half. They were unfortunate to be 1-0 down. They had a couple of good opportunities in the second half as well. But United's game management was probably certainly one of the most impressive, maybe the most impressive of the whole season. They defended really well. That's why it was such a blow for with Martinez going off. He's come back and he's made such a difference to that back four. There were some very good individual performances again, as there were at Wolves. I thought United were, in terms of their enterprise in play, they were better at Wolves. They created more chances. But yesterday, you could argue they were more clinical because it didn't feel like they had as many clear-cut chances as they did at Molineux. Okay, with the second goal, it's deflected and there's an element of luck there, particularly after it happened about a minute after Palmieri should have done a hell of a lot better up the other end and could have equalised for West Ham. But you look at the way things are progressing now, and Ten Hag touched upon this team possibly showing the potential that he was talking about earlier in the season. And for him, it's been a week of vindication because he has been able to pick his strongest team in both those games. There was just the one change, and as we've discussed before, Rafael Varane clearly can't start 2 games in a week, so that's why he came out and Harry Maguire started. And in those games, they've scored 7 goals. I think before that, I think they'd scored 6 goals in their previous 6 league games. So that just goes to show.
I think this is the first time they've beat an opponent by more than 1 goal in the league, isn't it, this season as well?
At Old Trafford, it would have been. But of course, they won 3-0 at Goodison. But yesterday's performance was better than the one at Goodison. I mean, in the first half at Everton, United were somehow 1-0 up without creating a chance. Yesterday, it just, I suppose that youth and experience was encapsulated by the first goal, and that you've got Casemiro pushing up the pitch with his pressing, that he wins the ball, gets to Højlund, and he scored some brilliant goals already, but I thought that was his best one, just to deceive the defenders by going onto his weaker foot and then hitting it as if it was on his stronger foot. And look, he's in terrific form at the moment. Yesterday was obviously his 21st birthday, but the real coming of age day for him, it feels like, was on Boxing Day with that winning goal against Aston Villa, because he scored in every Premier League game since then. And I know it's an obvious snapshot, and it's been on every match piece, it's been on all the back pages and newspapers, but of course Garnacho, Mainu and Højlund lined up for the second goal. That is United at the moment. They're at the forefront of everything good about them, and they are underpinned by some experienced players. As I mentioned, Casemiro, I thought, despite a couple of bad lapses, Maguire otherwise was pretty good yesterday. Luke Shaw, Martinez. So it felt like it had a really good blend of youth and experience, and they are, when you looked at that squad yesterday and even the bench, it was a much more proven bench. You go back only a few weeks ago to Wigan when They had a lot of players on there, some players who'd never played for the club before. It was a very raw Manchester United squad that evening due to the injury issues at the club. But where they have eased in recent weeks, Ten Hag has been able to play very strong sides. They've shown what they can do. They've got 11 goals in the last 3 games, and this is a team that until the winter break, mini winter break, whatever you want to call it, goals have been hard to come by for them this season. Now they are scoring a lot more freely. The goal difference column, it's still in the minus numbers, but looking back on their performances last week, probably should have been in the positives given the chances they had at Molineux. So it was a pleasant change actually to go to Old Trafford yesterday, feeling quite, with a bit of a spring in our step and feeling positive about United. And it was a difficult game against West Ham, and maybe the scoreline was a little bit flattering on United. As I said, I thought West Ham, Moyes said afterwards that West Ham played better at Old Trafford than they did against United at the London Stadium, and I'd agree with that. But of course, they won that game 2-0, and that's what football can be like. But it's been a really, really good start to the month to have won at Wolves, who had a terrific result yesterday and were in really good form going into the United game, and then to have beaten West Ham, who of course were above them in the table before yesterday. You can't ask for much more.
That was Højlund's 10th goal in all competitions. I think probably his best actually this season. Yeah. And as you said, shifting it onto his weak foot, lashing it home, it was his finish of someone who's really playing with confidence at the moment. We've wondered on this podcast, we've speculated when it was going to click. We could all see the potential, we could all see his quality, but it's now coming into play, isn't it? And he's really starting to bear fruit and actually have some end product in front of goal. Would you agree that was his best goal
yes.
so far?
Yeah, I wrote that in my piece yesterday. I suppose the Galatasaray goal when he ran from the halfway line and he made it a one-on-one, and that little dinked finish that stands out. Of course, the volley against Villa was terrific. But what's good about him is that he is scoring some brilliant goals, but he's also scoring some really scrappy goals. And I remember Solskjaer, when he was United manager, he said that he wanted Marshall to do that more. And
he scored pretty goals, though, wouldn't he, Martial? He was.
He was more of a. He certainly scored some pretty goals. He didn't really get himself in harm's way very often, which isn't a surprise with him. But those kind of scrappy goals, like I think
goal against Wolves was a traditional number 9.
Yeah,
just kind of got his body in the way.
Strikers should savour them as much as the great goals, and I think Højlund does. Like I was speaking to a fan yesterday, and they said that what they also especially love about Højlund is that whenever he does score, he looks absolutely pleased as punch, and that's not always the case with players for whatever reason, not just at United but other clubs. But he's really hit his stride. I thought when you looked at the team against Wolves last week, Wolves obviously play with a back 3. You half wonder, is he going to be isolated? He wasn't isolated at all, and Ten Hag said after that game he had to take him off because he was dead, and you get a shift from him, and that's what's also endeared him so quickly to United supporters, in that even though there have been times when he hasn't been scoring, the commitment you can't fault.
He's a proper personality, isn't he? We were just talking before we came on air.
Yeah.
It's the kind of his interview appearances and the way he talks brilliantly, the way he comes across, his passion, the way he plays. He just runs himself into the ground every game, doesn't he? And that's so endearing as a supporter.
Yes, and look, Ten Hag, I know obviously Højlund changed agents to SEG in the summer, who obviously represent Ten Hag as well. But Ten Hag did do his due diligence on him. It wasn't just like, he's now repped by Kees Vos now, I'll take.
Didn't play for Ajax though.
No. That the only Dutch association was Kees Vos. So
there was a link. There was a link there.
Yeah, indeed. Somewhere along the line, it had to come up. But he was convinced by his character. He told us in San Diego, and he thought he could handle he used the word stresses of dealing with playing for Manchester United. And you have noticed that with Højlund. There have been games where he's had chances, he's not taken them. And it's not really, there haven't been many occasions where his profligacy has cost United in a game. And although United haven't been doing well this season, I think a poorer striker, they would have fallen to pieces. They wouldn't have been able to recover from that. But he definitely has the right mentality. He does keep on going. He's got the backing of his manager. He knows absolutely that if he's fit, he's starting, which also helps. Some players could get a bit too comfortable there, but if you're playing for Manchester United, there are huge demands on you. He's got to be, I know it was Rashford last season, and the expectation was it should be Rashford this season as the most reliable source of goals, but that's now Højlund's remit going on. I think if you look at him, he's the number 9. And if you're the focal point, the striker, people are going to look to you to be bailing United out or boxing off games and being as prolific as possible. And as I said, I think it's 5 in his last 6 now. And that one game that he didn't score in was at Wigan, where he did get a bit of stick because
could have scored a hat-trick, couldn't he?
Yeah, he missed some very, very easy and gilt-edged chances that evening. But he's got some resilience about him. Like the manner of his goal against Tottenham was excellent. It was just bang, and it was past Vicario before he knew it. He kept on going at Newport, where he didn't get a lot of service that day, but he still gets a scruffy goal, and you think, good on you. You've kept on going. You're in the right place at the right time, and you've killed the game off. So he's made a really good positive start to the year. And also, of course, that one game that he missed recently when he was ill at Forest, they missed him. His absence was crucial to United's performance that night and how disappointing they were.
Well, they missed him because there's no one else who can play as a striker. Yeah, you can put Rashford there, but he sulks and he's just not the same player, is he? I mean, he's not been the same player on the left.
And of course, it meant Anthony had to start as well, which is also going to bring the mood down a bit.
I think what has helped Højlund this season massively is scoring those 5 goals in the Champions League. And I know it sounds like a really obvious statement, but every time someone would discuss his lack of a goal in the Premier League before he scored against Villa, he would say, look, I've done it in the Champions League, I've done it in European competition, it will come. And he comes across really confident in his interviews. And strikers have to be doing that. Naturally, they have to be confident. And what's also helped them is that link now with Garnacho and Rashford. Ten Hag kind of settled on this attacking front three. And we've talked about this team that is starting to settle down now. And he talks about the word patterns and rhythm, doesn't he? He uses them quite a bit in press conferences. But we're starting to see the connection between those 3 players. And it's really starting to work and help Højlund score goals.
Well, I think he happened upon it, or not happened upon it, that's maybe unfair, but it was Boxing Day, wasn't it, when those 3 started together with Garnacho on the right and Rashford on the left. And although they were 2-0 down at half-time to Villa, they created some really good chances in that first half. And yes, Villa were naive with their high line, and I don't know what they were playing at really, but United probably took them to the cleaners in the second half. And obviously, Garnacho got 2 goals. I'd say that was probably his best performance of the season. I'd have said that was Rashford's best performance of the season. Then it was the breakthrough with Højlund getting the winning goal. So it's
probably the turning point in hindsight.
I was about to say,
I didn't feel it at the time because they didn't build on it with Nottingham Forest.
I think maybe in 2 or 3 months' time, if United are in a much better place than they are now, then I think that will be viewed as the turning point. Even though 4 days later they had the setback of the Forest game, where you had the infamous Mainu substitution at half time, and I think a lot of fans' patience with Ten Hag at that point snapped. Maybe they, after their New Year's Eve night out, they probably slept on it and woke up and thought, okay, maybe it was a bit harsh, but that was a bad error by Ten Hag. But they have recovered from that. That 2-week period of not having any games, I think that has done them the power of good, because it has allowed players to come back in. Ten Hag said about the build-up being ideal for the resumption of the Premier League campaign, where they had a behind closed doors game against Burnley. Then it was an FA Cup game against a non-league side, which in the end it turned out to be more competitive than anybody thought it would be. But in hindsight, that was probably a good thing. It was beneficial. And then they went to Wolves and they were terrific. They played their best half of the season. Ten Hag thought it was probably their best hour of the season. But of course, you have to extend it to 90 minutes. That's why that game was as drama-laden as it was. But just looking at the team at the moment, and this is why it's such a shame with Martinez's injury, and I would expect the club to provide an update on that later on, and hopefully for him it's not as bad as it could be. But they've got it feels like there's a promising blend of youth and experience there. I'm not for 1 minute saying that this should alter the plans for the summer, because I've been quite consistent saying they need a right back, they'll need a centre back, they'll need at least 1 midfielder, they will need at least 2 forwards.
Basically, just went for the whole team, haven't you? That's the thing. It feels like that every summer almost.
I've not even mentioned a goalkeeper there. I'm showing faith in Onana and Bayindir. But I suppose if Tom Heaton goes, they'll probably need another backup goalkeeper. But I go back to it as well when they lost 3-0 to City, and I'll bring up. Again, I'll dine off it when I told you that Kobbie Mainoo shouldn't be with the under-21s. He should be playing against Newcastle next night. That was a missed opportunity, that game. I thought that was a chance to turn the page and play Højlund, play Garnacho, play Mainoo, because you've got the players there who are aligned with Ten Hag, that gives you an identity. He took too long to get to that point, but I suppose it has been worth the wait. You just hope for United's sake, and they'll hope that it hasn't been that they've not left it too late and that they do kick on now.
For blowing our own trumpets, my match report from that night read, Mainu, who's outgrown football, like academy football, and his talent is needed in the first team. And we've seen that over the last 2 months or so. He's been fantastic.
We know what we're talking about,
Samuel. A little trumpet there. It's a lovely little segue. We'll quickly discuss that celebration photo that you alluded to. Mainu, Garnacho, Højlund sitting there, beaming. It's like the Holy Trinity, isn't it, all again? I think that's going a bit over the top.
That is.
A bit over the top. But Rasmus Højlund is 21 years old. He celebrated his birthday yesterday, of course, on Sunday. Garnacho's 19, Mainu's 18. The future's bright, Samuel. The future's very bright.
If those three keep on the straight and narrow and keep on doing what they're doing, then it certainly should be for United, and you hope it would be. There've been some false dawns before with young players, but they've got a good manager, the right manager in terms of bringing young players through. Big fan of discipline as well, which will also keep them in check, you would hope. Mainu's had his breakthrough under Ten Hag. Garnacho pretty much has as well. I know that he made his debut under Rangnick, but he's Ten Hag's first academy legacy, and Højlund's his signing. So
isn't it amazing to think? Sorry for interrupting. When you go back to Ten Hag's first pre-season, when you went out to Thailand, Australia, Garnacho didn't get a minute. He was the only outfield player who didn't get a single minute.
Because he was late. I think he was late. He was late for a team meeting.
There was a little bit of a discipline problem.
Yeah,
there,
it was.
The last 18 months has been fantastic progress since.
Yeah, I remember during training at the Wacker in Perth as well, during the one of the keep ball sessions, and Marshall blocked an attempted pass by Garnacho and just stared him out, and then gave him a playful pat on the head as if to say, "Look, I'm still the main man around here." And look, the roles reversed quite some time ago with those two. But I remember when Garnacho did come in for his first start, was it against FC Sheriff, I think it might have been, in the Europa League group stage last season. It was out of the blue. Nobody really saw it coming at all, and it wasn't a case of that it was a dead rubber or anything like that. But he's not looked back since then, and he scored his first goal against Real Sociedad the following week, and he's gained Ten Hag's trust quite quickly, I think, especially given that transgression on the pre-season.
He started 19 games in a row now, which is amazing.
Is it 18 or 19?
I double-checked this morning, it's 19.
Yeah.
Which is, it's kind of gone under the radar, hasn't it? He's become almost undroppable in this team.
I know, as I've said it before, but Ronaldo and Rooney didn't get anywhere near that number of successive starts when they were teenagers at United. And that shows you, one, how important Garnacho is to them. Two, there is a lack of seniority, players who can ease the burden on the younger players. Ronaldo had Scholes, Giggs, Van Nistelrooy in that squad when he came in. United don't really have that. They've got seniority there, but they've not got professionals who are anywhere near as dependable as the players back in 2003. And look, in fairness to Garnacho, he's never looked remotely fazed by it. He's always had a sense of belonging at United. I remember when they won the Youth Cup, and the final was at Old Trafford, and a crowd of 50-odd thousand or 60-odd thousand, I think it was. And United fans, that was the night they sang Viva Garnacho, and he knew what they were singing, and he didn't look, it wasn't like, oh God.
But that whole Youth Cup was...
Oh, that's natural.
It was his stage, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Youth Cup.
yeah,
He was the talisman. He was performing almost for Old Trafford.
And I think in probably 4 or 5 of the games they were played at Old Trafford as well. I think they played Leicester, Everton, Wolves in the semi-final, Forest in the final. They were all at Old Trafford. So you've got the perfect stage to show what you can do. And he stood out, and Mainu stood out. And look, as I said, it's a big, of all the pros and cons we've discussed about Ten Hag this season, what he is doing with young players is a real big pro, and he did it at Ajax, and that was one of the reasons why he
are going to really
in.
like that as well. I actually did a piece on that. That's going to bode well. See, at the end of the season, if his future is assessed and the state of play, he can go on that, and the conversations go, look what I've done with Mainu, with Garnacho, and that's only going to help Ten Hag.
Yeah, I think he can make a compelling case there in terms of, look, just digressing slightly, but in terms of his recruitment, yeah, it's patchy to put it politely. But he can also say, well, I wanted Harry Kane, but we couldn't do it. I would have rather have had Jude Bellingham as my midfielder. He wanted to go to Real Madrid. he's got to take responsibility for a lot of those players, if not all of them who've come in and have not performed to expectations or to the level that you'd expect of a big Manchester United signing. But his track record with youngsters, it really, really does stack up in his favour. He did it with Ajax, with De Jong and Dalot and Van der Beek, back when Van der Beek actually resembled a footballer. And already there were 2 players who've come through the United Academy and they're starters in the first team. That, you know, you would not drop Manu, you would not drop Garnacho. And look what happened when Manu was substituted with the game very, very level. Well, it was only 0-0 at Forest. The game went against them, and the story of the night was look what happened when Kobbie Mainoo came off. So, yeah, that's one of the big pluses. And as you said, that picture, it reminded me a little bit of that great photo of the construction workers in New York lunch atop a skyscraper, which was a picture Sir Alex Ferguson had on his wall in his office at Carrington, and I think there were 11 workers on it. So he obviously drew the parallel 11 workers, 11 players in the football team, and Cristiano Ronaldo evocatively recalled seeing that image as well. So they need a few more players to have an 11 worthy of putting on the walls at Old Trafford and Carrington. But with those 3 players, I think they've got the nucleus of a team. If like Hoyland told Ty last week in the mix zone about that, you know, hopefully we can start our own era, and those 3, you'd definitely be behind them, and you've got to back them now.
Very exciting. It is very exciting. Yeah. Just to end this part, a quick question. So if I've said Garnacho started 19 games in a row, I did fact check that this morning. Which game was it? Did he not last start? I didn't word that very well. Fair enough. That is quite impressive how you've just, October 29th, and then he came into the team, Newcastle and the 3-0 Carabao Cup defeat, and he started every game since then. Yeah. So fantastic run for Garnacho. We'll leave it there for part 1. We'll be back in a moment for part 2. Welcome back to part 2 of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, as Samuel has said, it was a perfect afternoon except for Lisandro Martinez's injury. Bit of a hefty collision with Koufal. He went to go play on, didn't he? He briefly went off but came back onto the pitch. It was decided that he couldn't continue. Ten Hag said after the game, the direct quote was, "It's a personal disaster." And he said he admitted he was as concerned as the fans were. So it could be pretty bleak, the outcome. We don't know yet. As you said, we're recording this on Monday morning, so we could have some news later on the day. But his passing, I think that's so key with Martinez. He breaks the lines and he helps the team in build-up play. So if he's facing another layoff, it is going to be a huge blow, especially after just coming back. Well, there was a point in the first half where Maguire did very well. He got on the front foot, came forward and intercepted the ball, regained possession for United, and it drew applause, and the applause hadn't even stopped. And Maguire was already telling Martinez, "You go there, I'll drop back," because it was an acknowledgement that you're more of an asset in the middle third with your passing than I am. And Maguire's quite a good passer as well,
exactly,
isn't he? Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I know Maguire relinquished the captaincy last year, but it was a good form of leadership, I thought, and that's a big compliment for Martinez. But that's an acknowledgement of how important he is to the team in the opponent's half, and he is important in his own third as well. Look, I think it didn't get brought up in the press conference afterwards, and maybe it'll be a question on Friday, but I think the injury happened in the 66th minute, and he didn't come off until the 71st minute, having gone back on. And you have to ask questions as to why was he allowed back on. I mean, okay, it was 2-0. The game wasn't won, and Martinez's character...
I was going to say, you just know for a fact he would have said...
If his leg was dangling off, he'd still probably say, "Look, I want to..."
But it's the medical staff needed.
But the medical staff have got to take ownership of that, and it wasn't the only incident. I mean, Areola's collision with Zuma, I imagine that was the reason why he went off at half time, but it was strange how quickly that check was done. Again, what was going on there? And we saw on Saturday with Michael Elise coming on what a bad look it can be for player, medical staff and manager when a player is needlessly risked, and then he is probably ended up aggravating the injury that he had. So that would be the one other question that you'd have regarding the Martinez injury. Look, this is not an expert insight into it whatsoever. But my dad did do his ACL once, and he said, and he'll probably end up wrong now having said this, but he said, looking at the way Martinez did it and the fact that he actually was walking, he thought that maybe it wouldn't be an ACL, just because if he had done that, he would be struggling to walk. That said, Roy Keane did his ACL at Ellen Road in '97, and amazingly, he actually went back on the pitch to play it out because United had made all their substitutions. So I suppose there's an element of straw clutching that Martinez was walking. I remember when he did his metatarsal against Sevilla, a lot of people were thinking, has he snapped his Achilles? And it was Paul Scholes afterwards who was adamant that if you've snapped your Achilles, it looks a lot worse than the state he was in. I mean, I think Martinez was carried off by two of the Sevilla players who probably Argentina.
I don't think that was helpful though, actually, and it kind of looked like they were helping him at the time. But I mean, the medical advice is don't leave them there until an actual expert comes on. I know they were
2-1 down and wanted to get on with the game, didn't they?
I think United fans picked up on that as well. Obviously, they came back.
Even though it looked like great sportsmanship, it's like, get off, let's try and get a goal. and they did get another goal and made it 2-2. But look, I suppose one of the upsides for United yesterday was that, as I said, although he made 2 errors that led to goal scoring opportunities for West Ham, I actually thought Maguire was quite good. And they have got some depth there at the moment. Lindelof's back. Varane obviously didn't start because, as I said, he's Varane. He can't do 2 games in a week. I imagine he will be starting against Villa on Sunday. Look, none of them are ideal partners for Varane. You'd want Martinez there. Martinez is the one centre back who's absolutely guaranteed of being at United next season. You can't say that about any of the other senior centre halves. That's how important he is, and that's his standing in that department. So I just hope for his sake, given the injury issues that he's had over the last year with the metatarsal, he had to have 2 rounds of surgery. He's missed probably 6 months of football for United, and that's meant him missing out.
What month was the Sevilla game? Was that April?
It was April.
Yeah.
So he pretty much missed the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, so he missed the last 6 weeks. Then he was out for the first bit of the season. Obviously, he was back for a bit. Was in pain. Had surgery again. Yeah. He's only just come back. It's rotten luck if he's out for another.
I know, and it's 2 very different. Looks like it's 2 very different injuries as well. It's fracturing your metatarsal, and then this one clearly it's a knee injury. And I just hope it's knee ligaments, but. I think Ahmad had a knee injury in New Jersey against Arsenal, and he was out for what?
I mean, Ahmad returned to training. I think it was late September, but he didn't actually return to a match day squad until it was December, wasn't it? In
I suspect with Martinez they would want him back a lot quicker. I mean, with Ahmad didn't even get on the pitch again yesterday, which is I suppose certain players have their own followings, and I'm sure his followers would have been very disappointed to see Anthony come on ahead of him.
I think people have picked up on that as well, to be fair. I mean, I was going to ask you about Maguire, but you basically said it all. He had a good performance, he was very decent, and obviously 2 substitute appearances, Newport and Wolves, but that was his first start since Bayern Munich, since picking up that injury, so he deserves praise. Come on then, Samuel, we'll get into Dalot. Because for the listeners who don't know, I mean, we had a bit of a debate. There's obviously 4 of us who cover United for the MEN, me, Samuel, Ty and Rich, and I think it's fair to say, Samuel, none of us are completely sold on either player. I think they do need another right back, we can all agree. But me, Ty and Rich probably lean towards the Wan-Bissaka camp, and you lean more towards the Dalot camp. Now, when he did that fantastic sprint back in the second half, and he made that last-ditch block to deny Jared Bowen, probably a guaranteed goal, because Bowen's fantastic, I laughed at myself because I knew I was going to get a message from you, and 30 seconds later, a little notification, Samuel Luckhurst. Of course, you enjoyed that moment. But in all seriousness, it was a fantastic recovery from Dalot, wasn't it?
He's been playing well of late, I think. I thought he was very good at Wolves. He's been available for pretty much the entirety of the season. He's not had a single injury. There aren't many players in that squad who haven't been injured, but there must be something in the water in Portugal, because Bruno Fernandes has still never missed a game through injury for United, and Dalot has had, in the last few years, pretty much since he went to AC Milan on loan, he's barely been injured.
It's the Ronaldo effect, then.
Yeah, possibly. Effect. Of course, he got injured at the World Cup last season, and then he had a recurrence of the injury when he came back to United. But I think overall, I did a piece on him recently that detailed like how few games he's missed. He barely missed a game when it was the Solskjaer Rangnick season. He's not missed a game this season through injury. The only game that he wasn't available for was, of course, at West Ham through suspension, which was a ridiculous double yellow card from a grandstanding referee. And as I wrote in my piece yesterday, when Dalot firmly cements his place at right back, which he has at the moment, Wan-Bissaka goes missing, goes AWOL. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And there was one of our former colleagues, Tom Bristow, was also in your camp as well. And he said Wan-Bissaka is the better passer. And
I thought you implied with that message he thought Dalot was better.
I don't think even our colleague Carl Anker has probably ever done a piece on Wan-Bissaka's passing. I mean, I'm thinking, what is this passing? Has anyone done a YouTube compilation on Wan-Bissaka's
It's not something
passing?
that stands out when you think of Wan-Bissaka.
No. Look, he had a pretty good 2023. He came back, did well, and amazingly, he seems to be the only fullback at United who gets on with Anthony. Like, they had a decent rapport last season, and he did do very well in the second half of last season, particularly given what a write-off it was before the World Cup. But there's a reason why Dalot got a new contract last season, and there's a reason why they've extended Wan-Bissaka's contract this season. That's with a view to selling him in the summer. I mean, if they were to give Wan-Bissaka a new contract under Ineos, you might as well sack whoever's on the board at Ineos, because that is just something that Ed Woodward would do.
Big statement.
Well, it's not a big statement.
Who was the first choice left back for 10 of the 12 months in 2023?
What, Luke Shaw?
Sorry, left back. I've vodka again this morning. Right back. Because Dalot got injured at the World Cup. Wan-Bissaka started. Then he had a great end to the season. He was first choice right back, not left back, at the start of the season.
He got the highest player rating off me in the FA Cup final.
Exactly. And his renaissance, I thought, has been fantastic. He's only recently come out of the team with, I know you're kind of making the point, well, not a clarification what this injury is.
Well, this was the suspicious thing. I was, again, I'm showing my objectivity here. I was pretty much the only one on the planet who asked, why was he not at Newport? And the reply I got from someone at United was precaution. And
that precaution's gone on
that precaution's
2
gone.
weeks.
It's another one of those like sore back or illness, and then they're not seen for another month or so.
At the end of the day, you are going to have an upgrade on either right back. I know we've kind of debated that both of them merits.
And I've said this.
We all agree on that.
I've said this quite consistently all season, that come the summer they need to be signing a right back, and it's got to be a right back who's going to be competing with Dalot. You want healthy competition there. I spoke to an agent last year, and he was discussing that ahead of looking to the summer, because you wondered, would United go for a right back in the summer, given the interest in Jeremy Frimpong? But there was definitely a shift because of how well Wan-Bissaka did last season, where they thought, well, there's no point going for a right back in the summer, given his contract situation,
and the priorities,
given his form, given Dalot's got a new deal, given the priorities elsewhere, we can get by. But and I agreed with what the agent said to me, he said, like, they're both like quite good, but then you look at the other elite clubs, and Walker is up there, Alexander-Arnold up there. Until his recent wobble, you'd have put Trippier up there as well. And that's the problem United have got, in that, with Dalot, has he got that higher ceiling to reach those heights? I'd probably say not. So you're going to have to look for a right back. And I think that this summer is the time to do that. You've got to look for a right back who is of that profile that is possibly going to be...
Off the top of my head, I can't think of many names at the moment.
No, well, the obvious name who did spring up last year was Jeremy Frimpong.
Yeah, Leverkusen.
And of course, Leverkusen are having a terrific season, and he signed a new contract, so he would not be inexpensive. But also, are Ineos going to think, we'll go for another Dutch player? Like, there's a red flag already there. But if he wasn't Dutch, which I know is a strange thing to say, you'd look at him and you think,
apologies to any Dutch people on this podcast. It's nothing personal.
No, it isn't. It really, really isn't. But he does tick all the boxes. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But as I've said with Wan-Bissaka before, he would get in most Premier League teams, and I don't think United would struggle for a market for him in the summer either. I could see
him go to West Ham.
Yeah, I was about to say he'd be an upgrade at West Ham, Crystal Palace, going back there. I know there was an element of homesickness when he came up to Manchester as well. So if you're you're the new United sporting director, you should be getting on the phone to the London clubs and touching base to see if they'd be receptive to take him.
So if I think probably West Ham could be maybe a next move for Wan-Bissaka, what kind of club do you think would be in for Dalot if he had to leave?
Well, look,
that's an interesting question.
But this is the point. United have had inquiries for him from Dortmund, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, Roma. There've been a lot of esteemed clubs on the continent who've been in touch with him. I
think he's around that level, like Europa League level, not quite Champions League, but a Roma or a Benfica. He's better.
I've just mentioned Barcelona and Atletico Madrid.
I don't think he's at that level personally. I don't think he could start for Barca each week. Well, he probably could because they're not actually that good of a side. They won the league last season, but for Barca standards, it was a poor Barca.
I think when they played United, Xavi made the quite surprising switch of putting Araujo at right back when he's a centre back by trade. Probably because of the form Rashford was in at that time. But I think Dalot, with Shaw and Dalot, when Luke Shaw joined United, you thought, well, here's United's next left back for the next decade, and he is going to get there because it'll be 10 years in the summer that he's been at United. It's not gone smoothly, obviously, but he has got there. I think with Dalot, it could be similar in that there have been some very big bumps in the road, and he was very injury prone when he came to the club. He went out on loan to AC Milan for a season. Milan were another club that were interested in him.
That's it. I could kind of see him playing for Milan and
Champions League club.
I know, here or there.
Not out the famous tune.
The standard of them isn't that. I mean, I went there last January. Remember? I was gallivanting in Milan last January, and they got beat. I think it was 5-0 off. I think it was Sassuolo or Sampdoria, someone like that, and they were terrible. I was surprised how bad.
The standard in Italy is not what it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago, and there's a reason why United were dumping quite a few rejects there a few years ago. Smalling, Darmian, Sanchez, Ashley.
It was a United revolution in Milan, wasn't it? Really? And it worked because I think both teams had successful seasons.
Indeed.
In terms of what the result means, then Samuel up to 6 on the table, 6 points off Tottenham now in 5th.
Yeah, it was a good result at Goodison for United.
Aston Villa and Tottenham have had a little bit of a wobble in recent weeks, and United have kind of got this momentum, and we kind of talked about Champions League places on the last podcast, but all of a sudden we're looking ahead to the latter part of the campaign. We're thinking, if United mount a real challenge, it could be a really productive few months. It could be an excellent few months ahead. Well,
they've got to continue as they've started this month. As I said, they need to get 12 to 15.
They need a run of games, don't they? Just a few results.
I think they can do that this month. Yeah. They've made the right start, win the first 2 games. Sunday will be their toughest game of the month, no doubt, given what a good season Villa are having. And Villa should have won at Old Trafford if they were a lot savvier, which is strange to think that they weren't, given the players they've got and the coach they've got. But whatever happened.
Although we were making the point since then, they've actually had a bit of a drop-off. Probably since that game at Old Trafford.
And then, their weekend fixture was as kind as they come at Sheffield United, wiping the floor for them 5-0. And essentially they just declared after that 5th goal early in the second half. So they'll have had an 8-day breather. They've got returned to winning ways. And when you look at Villa's team as well, it's an objectively good team. There's a lot going for it and a lot of threatening players. They've become a much tougher side for United to play against since Emery came in. His first game in charge of Villa last season was against United, and they finally beat United at Villa Park in the Premier League since 1995. But in terms of United's form, as I said, they've got to be aiming to get between 12 and 15 points this month to be in with a shout, because Tottenham are definitely erratic. They concede a lot of goals. I think they might have conceded more goals than United in the Premier League this season. The goalkeeper seems to be getting targeted a lot more now. I think he's a very good goalkeeper, Vicario. He's been a good signing, but his very obvious kryptonite is set pieces.
Isn't it strange though that the narratives between the two teams, and we discussed this after the 2-2 draw. I mean, it's only 6 points. I know that's 2 wins, but it's just been so depressing almost for United this season. There's been so much going wrong. Tottenham, and we've said Ange Postecoglou's been this media darling, there's been so much positivity. Yeah. And yet United are 2 wins behind.
Well, yeah,
but then also at that game at Old Trafford, Tottenham were objectively much the better side.
Yeah, Tottenham were impressive at Old Trafford, but I think I'm going to put the tweet out after Tottenham went out of another cup competition to City that they are the most overhyped team I can ever recall, who do absolutely the square root of F all most of the time. They've won 2 League Cups in the last 30 years, but under Harry Redknapp, under Pochettino, probably under Andre Villas-Boas as well, now under Ange Postecoglou, it doesn't take a lot for people to hype them up. And look, I think Postecoglou has been a brilliant appointment. I think he's doing a brilliant job there. If they finish in the top 5, they'll have had a very, very good season, given their starting point. But the whole Big Ange, and these are colleagues of ours who are calling him Big Ange. Like if anyone's referring to someone by their first name, they've got to have a very good reason for doing it.
I referred to him in a piece recently. I think it was maybe September. And I was the likeable Ange Postecoglou, and it was while Liam was still here, and he laughed and went likeable. And now whenever he comes up, he always sends me a message and says the likeable.
I think that's fair enough. Yeah, I wouldn't have subbed that out if I was.
It's not as bad as Big Ange, is it?
No, that's just terrible. I can't understand the sycophancy over that. He is a breath of fresh air. He is likeable. You feel like he's engaged when he's speaking during a press conference, and his coaching cachet is a lot better than people thought at the time of his appointment by Spurs. But you have seen with Tottenham of late that there are definite chinks in their armour, and that's why it was so poor of United that they only drew against them with the players that Spurs were missing. United should have been winning that game. United, they didn't.
I've said this a few times on the podcast the day after that game. We spoke about it almost as if it was a defeat. It was a draw, but the performance was so disappointing because Tottenham rocked up without their best players, and they still were much the better side on that day. We'll leave it there for part 2, and we'll be back in a moment for part 3. Welcome back to part 3 of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, Samuel, we're going to look at a few loanees in this part. Donny van de Beek, Hannibal, Mason Greenwood, and anyone else you want to mention, feel free. But we'll start with Donny van de Beek. He hasn't had a mention on this.
It's going well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. He's not had a mention on this podcast in a little while. He was an unused substitute at the weekend in a 2-0 defeat to FC Cologne. He's obviously on loan with Frankfurt. We looked at that deal and the way it was actually organised and structured, and Frankfurt have the option to make it permanent, but they might not even do that.
Might not. I think there's a very good chance they've already declined it. He started the first 3 games, and I think his removals, his substitutions became earlier and earlier, and in the 3rd game he was taken off at half time.
So he played 63 minutes in, to be fair, it's very, very similar. 63 minutes in the first, 64 minutes in the second, then he was hooked at half time.
Yeah. And then he didn't have a kick against Cologne at the weekend.
He's regressed, hasn't he?
Is he regressed? Well, from his starting point at Frankfurt of actually playing minutes, I suppose he has, but
that's what I meant.
It's just him as a footballer. It's a shame what's happened there. 4 years ago, he was bound for Real Madrid. It felt like then COVID happened and changed his course from Madrid to Manchester, and he encountered Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who didn't fancy him, and he proved at United and he proved on loan at Everton that he wasn't up to it in the Premier League, and at the moment he doesn't look like he's up to it in the Bundesliga. It's early days for him, but United fans would despair, and rightly so, if first day of pre-season and they put the images out on their social media channels, and if you see Van der Beek in the new training gear under Ten Hag or possibly a new manager or whatever under this new Ineos era, they need to get shot of him as soon as possible.
It is a shame though, as you said. I know we're kind of make light of it, but he was such a highly regarded talent at Ajax. I think I've talked about that run a few times in the Champions League. It was probably a bit overrated when Ten Hag's team got to the semis, because people don't really talk about teams in the light they do with that Ajax team. Remember Villarreal, was it the season before last, it got to the semis against Liverpool and they lost.
Yeah, they did.
And people don't wax lyrical about that Villarreal team because they lost in the semi-finals, and they bottled it in massive style against Spurs. A 2-goal lead, was it? And 3-2 up in Amsterdam.
Oh, Ajax did. Yeah. Sorry, I thought you were on about Villarreal.
Seeing the Ajax team, people kind of talk about them and hammer them with praise, but why? They bottled it in the semi-finals.
In fairness, they beat Real Madrid 4-1 in the Bernabeu, and they went to Juventus. Ronaldo of Juventus
against Spurs in the semi-final. That's unforgivable.
Well, that did certainly undermine their Champions League run. And there was that picture of obviously all of the players collapsed when after Moura's 3rd goal went in. They should have got to the final. I was was ready to don my Ajax shirt for the final that year, given that they were playing against Liverpool. But unfortunately, it had to go back in the souvenir box.
That was one of the worst Champions League finals in recent memory.
Well, you knew who was going to win that long before the final took place.
That is a shame, and I would like to see him do well on a personal note, because he's had just such a torrid time, but he just looks below the standard now, doesn't he? You just wonder what he's good at. Hannibal, he's at Sevilla. A bit of a bizarre start, because Sevilla released a statement after his debut and basically said he's not going to be considered for selection. That reverted. He was back in the squad the week later. So
and didn't come on in that game, did he?
Yeah, I think. 1 second there. He's a new substitute against Osasuna. I've got it.
And
they're
playing this evening, which we're speaking on the Monday.
Yeah, but from all accounts, doesn't really fit with Hannibal's character.
Another option to buy that will probably end up being declined.
But when you talk to people, he's supposed to be a likeable lad around Carrington. I spoke to Birmingham City's former assistant manager, Matt Gardner, and he gave him glowing praise as well. Talked about how much of a good lad he was. So I was a bit surprised to see Sevilla come out and there's something going on.
I think when he made his debut, a friend of mine was watching it and said that he was going spare at teammates and essentially telling them what they were doing wrong. And you can imagine how well that's gone down in a dressing room.
Manchester United loanee, young lad coming in. Yeah, not a good look. Yeah,
well, there's that, and also they're in a relegation scrap as well. So it's not a happy camp. I mean, going back to last season, how United allowed them to beat them in the Europa League, it probably still smarts for Ten Hag. They shouldn't have ended up losing that tie 5. They shouldn't have ended up losing that tie. Never mind 5-2 on aggregate. It's a little bit peculiar that a lot of United youngsters are going to Spain on loan, because realistically, there's the chances of these moves becoming permanent is remote. There's no money in La Liga. I mean, Pelestri's gone to Granada. I'd be amazed if Granada buy him, because United should be looking to make a profit on him, given his international status with Uruguay and the skill set that he has. But I can't see Granada stumping up.
Well, we mentioned
15
that.
million euros.
Was it on Wednesday when our editor had a leaving party? We discussed it and said, how much would you actually get for Pelestri? He was signed obviously for 9 million in 2020 from Penarol. They should make a profit, but I couldn't actually see them making a profit on him. I think it's probably in the region of 9 million is what you'd actually receive.
I think you've got, maybe some add-ons as well. And this is the buzz phrase United come up with. It's add-on, sell-on. Obviously, when Hansen Aaron left on deadline day, they didn't disclose what the fee is, which is always telling. If they get a good fee, they'll tell us about it. But I think also with Mason Greenwood and Getafe, I'd be amazed if Getafe stumped up money for him, because although let's face it, there are damaged goods there for a number of reasons. United aren't just going to want to give away a player who's still going to have a year left on his contract come the summer.
It's a really interesting scenario of Greenwood, I think. I mean, in terms of his actual performance this season, 7 goals and 4 assists he's contributed. He scored against Betis at the weekend. And it's a difficult situation because clubs know that United need to sell. We've discussed and said it's best for him not to drive into Carrington on the first day of pre-season. You want to do a quicker deal with Greenwood. But that kind of hurts your bargaining position, doesn't it, when you're negotiating with any club that might want him?
But if you've got to take the hit, you've got to take the hit. And I know the profitability and sustainability rules are a big factor in United's dealings now, when selling an academy player, as Rich has said before, it represents a whole 100% profit, which is probably why Chelsea in the summer will sell Conor Gallagher, because they need to raise. I mean, the chances are Chelsea won't be in European competition again next season. They've got a stadium that is more dated than Old Trafford. It's a lot smaller than Old Trafford. Yeah, they're going to be under immense pressure to make big bucks on certain players, and all the players who you'd expect to go to a Saudi Pro League side, they have gone already, most of them.
And it also feels like that Saudi Arabia money has actually run out a little bit. There's been players coming back, obviously Jordan Henderson to Ajax, but it doesn't seem to have really taken off as people expected.
I felt in the summer it was overhyped. There was a lot of attention on it. Understandably, for some colleagues, that their editor will say, "Oh, can you do a piece on it or find out more about it?" Because there's interest in our readership in what's going on out there. But we saw it with the Chinese Super League a few years ago, and who talks about the Chinese Super League now? I mean, Sky bought the rights to show Chinese Super League games as if anyone would want to watch them, and I don't think many people, as you can tell from the attendances in Saudi Arabia, nobody Nobody could care less about it. I mean, Ronaldo thought he was going to be a trailblazer going out there, but he's not. It's just he's settled into a very lavish retirement.
He would disagree with you there, Samuel. Ronaldo would have something to say about that.
Well, I'm sure he would. I'm sure he wouldn't even care what I say. But he was never, even going back nearly 50 years ago when Pele and George Best were playing in America, and they thought that soccer was going to take off in the United States, and it didn't. They had to. They're still waiting for it to really properly take off out there. I know the interest is a lot greater now than ever before.
Beckham definitely helped in that regard, I'd say.
It did help, but has it made that much of a difference?
Probably not, no.
And also he was clearing off to Milan on loan, PSG as well, because he realised that I'm not going to be getting in the England squad all the time. I mean, it came up in his documentary. Capello told him that you're going to have to go on loan and play in Europe if you want to stick around, if you want to stay at the party. So that's what he did, and it did sour relations between him and the LA Galaxy, again, as covered in the documentary.
We've went off topic a little bit there. Should we try and go back to Greenwood a little bit? If you had to speculate what kind of fee United could get, what would you say? What would your ballpark be?
Has his resale value gone up that much by just scoring a few goals in a league that's in decline, where there's no money, where Getafe are not expected to do anything? I mean, where are Getafe in the table even? It's an interesting story that's going on in La Liga this season, where Girona are doing so well and they've somehow managed to sustain it. Yeah, I mean, they are what they are. They're a mid-table team. I think that has that enhanced his reputation greatly? No. I think it helps in the sense that any new club that would buy Greenwood, they're not the first to take that gamble. But if you're buying him, what I'd say to that is that Getafe have taken him on loan. I remember on deadline day, I mean, we were surprised when it came out of the blue that he was going on loan, because what United were telling us when we were at Carrington, because there was a press conference, was that a lot of clubs, they would ask about Greenwood. It would get out there that they'd asked about Greenwood. There'd be a fan backlash. The club would back off. Getafe kept it under wraps deliberately because they did not want a fan backlash. It was, they're in for Greenwood, next minute they've signed Greenwood. And of course there was a backlash of some sort, and there have been some incidents over there this season. I think his first game there was some chants about his alleged conduct and what happened over here with the investigation into his arrest in January 2022, wasn't it? But still, if you're the club that's taken him on permanently, it's not that long ago that I woke up on that Sunday morning and I was told, have you seen what Mason Greenwood's done? And then thinking, oh God, what a day this is going to be. I can't believe that's 2 years ago. That's what I mean. It feels very current. It doesn't feel very long ago at all. And it's a different era in this social media. I'm trying to pin you down to a fee here. You're like a politician. 20 million, should we start off with that? They'd be lucky to get that. So 10 for Mason Greenwood? I think they've just got to wash their hands of him. Like, if they get 10 million for a bit, who cares if someone on Twitter is complaining about the fee they got off Mason Greenwood? They need to get shot of him. Yeah. And look, a couple of months after he'd gone to Getafe, people at United, we were still asking them, look, do you think there's a chance of him coming back? And they were saying, look, can't see it. And I don't think, look, do Ineos want the bad publicity of coming in saying, oh, we'll take Mason Greenwood back? I don't think so. There are a lot of Manchester United fans that would walk away from the club if he ever played for the club again. And I don't think they'd waver from that stance. It's a potential PR disaster and not what you need when you're starting off your ownership at a club. Thank you very much for your time, Samuel. That's it. Thank you, Stephen. Today. Thanks to listeners as usual. There'll unfortunately be no midweek podcast on Wednesday with Rich and Ty. I'm not sure why. I presume our producer's gallivanting, is he, across there as he looks at us with his hands behind his head. But we'll be back later on in the week to look ahead to the Aston Villa game, and there should be some coverage on the YouTube channel for the Munich disaster anniversary at Old Trafford tomorrow. So thanks for listening and have a great week. Take care.